You might think that you're playing GTA 5 online in the best possible way, but trust me, unless you're using the settings that I talk about in this video, you are actively hurting your gameplay experience and possibly putting yourself at a disadvantaged position against PvP sweatlords. Because the truth is that while skill is the ultimate advantage you can have in a game, stable frame rates and correct camera settings also matter a lot in GTA because Rockstar enables certain visual effects by default that all negatively affect your situational awareness, and I'll teach you how to turn those things off. And if you're on PC, you might want to stick around till the second half of this video because I'll show you how you can get GTA 5 to run at a stable high frame rate even with an absolute potato of a rig. Alright, first things first, we're gonna do is fix how our game looks, and for this we're gonna make a few changes to the UI as well as FOV. Then we're gonna turn off motion blur, depth of field, and other post-processing effects that adversely impact our ability to see things in the distance or objects on the periphery of our screen. Starting with the UI, I know a lot of you prefer the simple white dot reticle just like me because it does give you the feeling that your bullets are all going into the same place, but also it makes your on-screen visual effects just less cluttered. But in reality, different guns in GTA have different recoil patterns, and there's quite a bit of random bloom or spread, especially with the hard-hitting automatic rifles like the Combat MG or Battle Rifle. And this is pretty obvious to anyone who's spent more than 5 hours in GTA, but what some of you may not know is that your weapon's accuracy and the recoil pattern will vary significantly depending on whether you're in first person and with which optic you've equipped on your weapon. Weapons will group tighter in first person, and the accuracy increases even further when you zoom in with the scope. So from least to most accurate, it goes like this. First, you have third person hipfire, where you're just shooting without zooming in, and this has the most spread or the lowest chance of hitting your target. Then one step above it is we've got first person hipfire, which doesn't really contain the side to side sway of your weapon all that much, but I've noticed that it reduces the vertical climb, and you can test this just by standing next to a wall and shooting your gun to observe the spread of your rounds. Is first person hipfire the most accurate way to shoot in this game? No, but it does beat third person hipfire and prints a slightly tighter group of bullets. And one step up from that is third person with a zoomed in view, of course. On PC, you do this by right clicking and scrolling up. On console, you just press the right stick. This is significantly more accurate than hip firing or just normal ADSing in first person or third person, and it will reduce the recoil by approximately 70%. But you can take it a step further by going into first person and using your medium scope or holographic sight, whichever you have equipped on your weapon currently. It reduces your situational awareness as you're essentially staring through a tube, but it does give you the best possible accuracy. And in this mode, even without pulling down to control the recoil, you can put 30 or 40 rounds through a torso-sized target at 10+ meters. At this point, you might be asking, well, that's cool, but what does recoil control have to do with UI settings? And I've got a tip for you. You can go into settings, open display settings, and change your weapon target from simple to complex if you'd like. This will give you that actual crosshair instead of the little white dot, and that'll give you a much better idea of bullet spread if you're having trouble anticipating what it is on a certain weapon. Plus, if you fire a machine gun or assault rifle, it will turn into a dynamic crosshair, which means it'll grow and shrink in size to reflect the bloom on your gun in real time as you use it. So as you keep firing, the crosshair gets larger and you get a better idea of how accurate or even inaccurate your weapon is. And you can also tell that certain guns have a quicker reset on the bloom because your crosshair will shrink back down faster when you stop firing. So for example, Combat MG Mark II takes longer to reset its accuracy compared to the Special Carbine Mark II, for example. That's why I always recommend enabling the complex crosshair to new players. Once you master the recoil, you can go back to the simple dot if you so choose, or you can even leave complex crosshairs on. It's ultimately your choice long term. The next thing we're going to do is improve your situational awareness by turning off a bunch of Hollywood effects that the game enables for you by default. These look great in movies, but they're not very useful when you're trying to fend off PvP griefers in a game like GTA Online because our eyes don't function like cameras, and smearing a layer of Vaseline on the edges of the screen may be immersive, but to me it feels like glaucoma, and I'd rather maintain my peripheral vision than have a more cinematic experience in a video game. To turn off all the post-processing effects, go into your graphics settings, scroll down to post effects, and disable both motion blur as well as depth of field. Motion blur turns everything into a smeary mess, and this is supposed to give you a better sense of speed by tricking your eyes, but all it does for me is remove crucial detail from my screen, especially when my enemies are way out there in the distance and all I can see is a blur. No thank you. My brain has built-in motion blur itself, and I don't need artificial blur on top of that. I also play at high refresh rates, so it doesn't even matter anyways. Depth of field is when you view things through a camera and it focuses on the things that are nearest to you in the scene while blurring out stuff in the periphery or long distance. Again, this is something that we do naturally with our eyes, so I'd rather the game give me the full picture instead of artificially applying a smoothing effect on anything that isn't in my direct focus. If you've been playing with motion blur and depth of field enabled up until this point, I guarantee you that you're going to notice a huge improvement. If you don't believe me, try turning those settings back on after a few days of playing like it, and you'll immediately feel like you're missing something important. Also, if you're on console, I don't see a reason to be playing on any mode other than performance or performance RT, because going from 30 FPS to 60 FPS is an insanely huge leap. Animations are smoother, your input is reflected quicker on screen, and it just feels so much better and more responsive. If you play single player story only, then I can understand why you'd want to have fidelity mode enabled, but current gen consoles give you a really nice compromise with performance RT, which enables some of the more fancy lighting effects while simultaneously giving you a 4K 60 FPS experience. Granted, it is upscaled 4K if you enable performance RT rather than just performance, but during fast-paced action sequences, you can hardly tell the difference, and for me, that additional frame rate is going to be way more important if I'm dealing with other players during my business source missions or if I'm playing something like an adversary mode. With all the UI and graphic settings out of the way, next it's time to fix up that camera. Open up your settings, go into camera, and here you'll want to change a few things. Start with first person on foot field of view, crank it up all the way to the max. It's kind of like pulling the camera back, and it gives you more information on your screen at any given time, which is never a bad thing to have. Also, if you're tired of manually switching between camera modes every time you enter or exit a vehicle, toggle allow independent camera modes from off to on, and every time you enter a vehicle, it will automatically switch to third person, and as soon as you get out of it, it'll go back to first person. There are some other camera settings in here that we need to change for a better gameplay experience too, and one of those is first person combat roll. Turning this off will switch you to third person every time you do a combat roll, and then snap back into first person after that roll animation finishes. With this setting enabled, your entire screen will flip upside down, and you'll lose track of your enemy pretty easily. If you don't get into gunfights very often, you may not use combat roll a whole lot, but it's basically the dodge roll from Dark Souls, and while it doesn't give you iframes, it will break the auto aim for controller players who are trying to lock onto you just for a fraction of a second, and that's enough time to set up a headshot of your own on them. Speaking of which, if you're on controller, you'll want to switch your sprint mode from tap to sprint to hold to sprint, and you'll also want to reduce the aiming dead zone for both first person and third person to 0. This will make your crosshair much more responsive and reduce the lag between you moving your stick and your character moving their gun on screen. This also makes it much easier to switch between targets if you've got auto aim enabled, and if you're going to use auto aim, make sure it's set to assisted aim full. Auto aim settings can only be changed in story mode, so just load into story mode, change it to full aim assist, and load back into online from there. Personally, I find free aim so much more fun and engaging in both Red Dead Online and GTA Online, as it has a higher skill ceiling, and you'll also feel more in control of where your gun is pointing, but you're free to stick to auto aim if you like the feel of it. I've seen a lot of players say that they'll use auto aim for PvE missions and switch to free aim for PvP, or even vice versa, so if that's you, just make sure your aim assist is set to full rather than partial. And for PS5 owners, if you don't like the way your trigger resists your finger the more you press it inward, simply turn off adaptive triggers in the control menu. This will give you a nice linear travel while driving and shooting, which is better for long play sessions, and if you combine this with low or even zero controller vibrations, it'll also increase your controller's battery life quite significantly. If you're on PC, I suggest leaving free aim on unless you like playing with a controller rather than keyboard and mouse. In the keyboard and mouse tab, there are a few things you need to change as well. First, make sure your mouse input is set to raw for minimal input lag, and if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can also enable NVIDIA Reflex in the graphics settings to give you the lowest possible input latency. I believe AMD has something similar called anti-lag, but I think you'll have to enable this from the graphics driver menu itself, as it doesn't show up within the GTA in-game settings. However, the best way to reduce input lag on PC is by increasing the frame rate, and for this you'll have to tweak a few graphics settings. I'll tell you which ones make the most difference, but first let's finish tweaking our mouse and keyboard settings. In the keyboard and mouse tab, you'll see a setting called Fine Aiming Control, and you might think, based on the name, that this will give you more precise control. In reality, it actually has the opposite effect. It will enable mouse acceleration, which means your crosshair will cover a different amount of distance based on how fast you move the mouse, rather than moving a fixed distance that's tied to directly how far you physically move the mouse. So, best to leave that setting off. Going back to camera settings for a bit, and this applies to both PC as well as console, you guys definitely want to turn off both first-person ragdoll as well as first-person head bobbing. Both of these will stop your screen from shaking around as you run in first person, and that's a good thing because we're trying to play GTA Online, not watch a Jason Bourne movie with shaky cameras. There are two more camera settings we need to tweak here, and these are vehicle camera height as well as first person, third person cover. If you want a better view of the road, change the vehicle camera height from its default setting low to high. You'll suddenly feel like you're way better at dodging traffic and shooting at enemies. Then switch first person, third person cover from off to on. This will ensure that whenever you take cover while on first person, the camera will automatically switch to third person to make it easier to take cover and shoot enemies, but as soon as you come out of cover, it'll snap back into first person automatically for you. With all the camera and UI settings taken care of, it's time to tweak some graphics settings for all you PC players out there. This will help you extract the maximum FPS out of your gaming system, especially if it's running older hardware. My recommendations here are based on the testing done by YouTube channel Gamers Nexus, and they basically went through every single setting to see which ones have the most severe impact on FPS, and you can watch their video after this, but I'll give you a quick rundown here. If you're on the legacy version of the game, the best way to increase your FPS is disabling MSAA altogether. In its place, use FXAA for anti-aliasing. If you're on expanded and enhanced, you don't have to worry about MSAA at all because it's been removed and replaced with a choice of TAA, DLSS, sampling, or AMD FSR. Don't use sampling, it absolutely sucks. Instead, use either the default TAA, or if you want to render at a lower internal resolution, go with NVIDIA DLSS or AMD FSR. If your CPU bottlenecked, enabling DLSS or FSR won't do much to improve your frame rate, but if your GPU is the bottleneck preventing you from getting a high frame rate, these will massively boost your frame rate and response times respectively. I wouldn't go any lower than balanced, especially with FSR, because it looks really blurry, but with the recent DLSS 4 update, I found that even enabling performance DLSS doesn't really make the game look that bad compared to quality. So if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you're in luck because you can play at 1080p while the game is actually rendered internally at 540p, giving you tons of GPU headroom to enable effects like ray tracing. Personally, I'd rather have native resolution and ray tracing off rather than RT on with DLSS, but that's just me. As long as you have the options, you can make the right choice for yourself. Also, another side note, if you play on Legacy, never bump up the grass textures higher than normal, as it'll just tank your FPS no matter what system you're on. Also, by the way, don't worry too much about other texture quality options in the game. As long as you have 8 GB or more of VRAM, you can max out the textures and there will be zero impact on your frame rates. If you're still struggling to hit your target frame rate though, I'd suggest dropping the grass down like I said, or even the water quality down from ultra to high, or of course even normal. If you have a potato PC that's 7 or 8 years old, this should be enough to guarantee at least a locked 60 FPS for you. And there you have it guys, this is my optimized settings guide for GTA Online. If you use these settings, I guarantee that you will become a better player, and by using my graphic settings, you'll also clear up a lot of the visual clutter on your screen. For PC players, feel free to use these graphical tweaks and let me know down in the comments if it improves your FPS. Just make sure ray tracing is disabled if you have an entry-level RTX card like an RTX 2060 for example, because it just doesn't have the raw grunt and power to guarantee 60 FPS with everything else maxed out alongside RT. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Make sure to drop a like on it if you found it informative. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and want to see more GTA Online content like this. Feel free to check out my Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram, specifically twitch.tv/hazardoushdtv for more GTA Online live streams. And I will see you guys in the next GTA 5 online video. Adios, amigos.